I grew up in a suburban neighborhood where everyone knew your name, the dog's name, and even what you had for dinner the night before. I loved the predictability, the soft hum of sprinklers at dawn, the occasional laughter of kids on bikes, the gentle creak of the mailbox as the mail carrier made her rounds. It was the kind of place where you left your doors unlocked, trusting that human decency was universal. I never questioned it, until Evan Shore moved in. I noticed him the moment the moving van pulled up across the street. His house was a modern affair, all glass and steel, a stark contrast to the modest brick homes around it. The sunroom in front caught every slant of sunlight and reflected it like a spotlight onto the street. That first afternoon I walked past, waved politely, and caught him staring at me from inside. He didn't wave back. He didn't even blink, really. He just watched. Probably just curious about the new neighbor, I muttered to myself, shaking my head. But that evening, after returning from a long shift at the hospital, I stepped onto my porch and froze. Evan was standing in my front yard, arms at his sides, eyes fixed on the living room window. Can I help you?" I called, my voice unsteady. He didn't respond. He just turned and walked away without so much as a glance over his shoulder. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was lost, maybe something else. But then came the small things that felt wrong, like shards of ice in my gut. I'd see him crouched behind my mailbox in the early morning, or standing on the side of my garage when I got home. One night, as I drove past his sunroom, I caught him scratching something into the glass. I shouted toward him, "Hey, what are you doing?" But he only looked up at me with a blank, unwavering stare, then continued, deliberately etching whatever he was drawing. Sleep became a stranger. I could feel the weight of his gaze even inside my own home. Then, one night, I woke to the unmistakable sound of pacing just outside my bedroom door. I froze, heart hammering. The floorboards whispered under the weight of someone moving, and then a whisper, the kind that crawls under your skin, slid along the floorboards, carrying my name. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand, heart racing, and slowly approached the door. Shadows danced beneath the frame, moving with deliberate, eerie timing. I bolted the door, called 911 and waited, shaking, until the police arrived. That night changed everything. I couldn't unsee the intentions behind Evan Shore's eyes, and I couldn't ignore the way normal life had fractured around me. The police took him without incident, but what they found in my crawl space turned my fear into something tangible. There, crouched in the tight, dusty space, was Evan, notebook in hand, detailing every inch of my home. The sketches were precise, labeled with measurements, furniture positions, even notes on when lights switched on or off. Pages were dated months before he had even moved in. He had been following me long before I even knew his name. Why my house?" I asked one officer, voice trembling. "Looks like an obsession," he said bluntly. "He's been planning this for a long time." I nodded numbly, looking at the shattered sense of security that had once been my neighborhood. When I visited his sunroom later, the scratch marks were still there, etched deeply into the glass. Closer inspection revealed the most disturbing detail: a crude but unmistakable carving of my face. He wasn't just watching. He was mapping me, mentally and physically, like a predator charting territory. The investigators told me that Evan's behavior fit the pattern of someone with deep-seated fixation issues. "He's dangerous," they warned. "Stay vigilant. Don't go home alone." Returning home after that day was surreal. Every shadow seemed heavier, every passing car a potential threat. I changed my locks, installed new security cameras, and refused to walk to my mailbox without a friend. My neighbors tried to comfort me, but they didn't understand the psychological weight. It wasn't just fear. It was the creeping realization that someone had been inside my mind long before my front door. I began digging into Evan's past, desperate to understand the man who had infiltrated my life. Public records revealed a pattern. He had moved from city to city, rarely staying in one place longer than a year. Neighbors remembered odd behaviors, peering through windows, pacing in empty yards, leaving notes in mailboxes. Every story matched mine. I started seeing a therapist to help manage my anxiety. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing in my yard, scratching my face into glass, whispering my name. I learned grounding exercises, deep breathing, and cognitive techniques, but nothing erased the memory. It felt as though my own home no longer belonged to me. One afternoon, my friend Kelly came over. "You can't live like this forever," she said, her voice firm. "You've got to take back your life." "I'm trying," I said, though the knot in my chest refused to loosen. "It's just, he planned everything. He was inside my house, inside my head. How do I ever feel safe again?" "You start small," she said. "Open a curtain, walk in your yard, take back one thing at a time." So I did. I opened the blinds I had kept drawn for weeks, stepped onto the porch, and felt sunlight hit my face. I paced the yard, then the street, then the block. The first steps were terrifying. The fear didn't vanish, but slowly, I began to remind myself that Evan was gone, that the police had him, and that I had survived. Months passed, and Evan faced trial. I testified, detailing every encounter, every whisper, every sketch. Seeing him in court, restrained and expressionless, brought a mix of relief and revulsion. Justice was slow but eventual. He was sentenced to several years in a mental health facility, monitored closely. Even as I returned to my routines, vigilance never fully left me. I invested in reinforced doors, security lighting, and cameras. Every visitor's knock set my heart racing initially, but over time, I began reclaiming normalcy. Mailboxes were no longer terrifying, shadows no longer sinister, and the night no longer felt oppressive. I still looked at my neighbor's empty sunroom across the street occasionally, half expecting movement, half expecting nothing. Life had resumed, but the lesson of hyper-awareness, of recognizing danger even in mundane places, remained imprinted. Eventually, I sold the house. The memories of Evan Shore were embedded in every corner, every floorboard, every scratch on the sunroom's glass. I moved to a new town, a quieter neighborhood with friendly faces and no looming sunrooms. Slowly, I learned to sleep with doors unlocked, to step outside without trembling, and to trust my instincts again. This time, informed by experience rather than naivety. But I never forgot the fear, the creeping dread of being watched, the helplessness of realizing that someone had invaded my life before I even knew his name. I told my story openly to friends, neighbors, and even local community groups, emphasizing awareness, the importance of trusting intuition, and the power of acting on suspicion before it escalates. Through it all, one truth remained crystal clear. Some people live their lives in shadows, hiding dangerous intentions behind ordinary faces. And while you cannot always prevent their obsession, you can reclaim your life by trusting yourself, staying vigilant, and refusing to let fear paralyze you. The world can harbor hidden dangers even in the most mundane places. Awareness, vigilance, and trusting your instincts are crucial tools for self-protection. You cannot control the actions of others, but you can control your response, reclaim your space, and prioritize your safety above all else. I never thought my life would come to be defined by a single night in 2020. Back then, I was 30, working long shifts as an NHS nurse and trying to hold myself together in a world that felt like it was slowly unraveling. The COVID lockdowns had turned every day into a blur of fear, exhaustion, and quiet bravery. I kept telling myself I was strong, that I could handle it, that I just needed to keep going. My husband, Imran, was working as a delivery driver, one of the countless essential workers who left the house before dawn and came back long after dark. We shared quick dinners, half-asleep conversations, and promises to rest when things get better. I don't think either of us believed it. Around that time, the house next door was rented out to a man I barely ever saw. He seemed harmless at first, quiet, kept to himself, hardly any movement at odd hours. But early in 2020, a new guy started staying there. Older, maybe mid-50s, He wasn't on the lease, but I didn't think much of it. Everyone was struggling. Everyone needed somewhere to go. But the way he looked at me, that made something in my body tense in a way I couldn't fully explain. His eyes lingered too long. He watched too closely. I'd catch him near the window or standing on the path, staring like I was something pinned under glass. Still, I brushed it off. Women are taught to do that, to swallow discomfort, to avoid making a scene, to second-guess the instincts that are literally built to protect us. That winter night was bitterly cold. Frost covered the windshield of my small hatchback, the air frozen enough to burn my lungs. Road closures meant my usual drive to the hospital was blocked off. The only route left was a narrow back street lined with old brick houses and broken street lamps. Quiet, dim, unsettlingly empty. I remember locking the front door behind me, tugging my jacket tight, thinking only about the long shift ahead. I was exhausted, but I had done this 100 times. I didn't know then how fast everything was about to spiral into something I still have trouble speaking about. When I stepped outside, I saw him. The neighbor's guest, standing near the driveway like he'd been waiting for something, maybe waiting for me. He smiled, and something inside me dropped. "Hey, Ms. Amjad," he called out. His voice was rough, like gravel dragged across pavement. "Just want to say you look incredible in those leather trousers." For a second, my brain froze. I didn't even realize he knew my name. And I hated the way he said it, like he'd practiced it. My heart started pounding so hard it felt like noise in my ears. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. I just forced a polite nod, fumbled my keys, and speed-walked to my car with my pulse thudding wildly. When I got inside, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my glasses. I locked the doors immediately. I kept telling myself, just go, just drive. But that's when I realized my phone wasn't in my pocket. I must have left it inside the house. For a moment, I actually considered driving without it, but the thought of being stranded without a phone during a lockdown scared me just as much. So I talked myself into it. Just run inside. 2 minutes. He'll be gone. I sprinted into the house, grabbed my phone off the counter, checked every window like a paranoid child, and finally stepped outside again. To my relief, the driveway was empty. He was gone. But the street felt too quiet, too hollow. I told myself I was overreacting. That stress was getting to me. That my kickboxing instructor's lectures about trusting instincts were just noise in my head. I wish I'd listened to them sooner. I put the car in gear and started down the dark street, trying to shake off the discomfort clawing up my spine. But barely 3 minutes later, I felt the car pull to one side. A sickening wobble, a scraping sound. I cursed under my breath and pulled over beneath a flickering streetlight. When I stepped out, my stomach dropped. The tire hadn't gone flat. It had been slashed. I stared at the tire, a cold wave of disbelief washing over me. I wasn't a mechanic, but even I knew a clean cut didn't happen by accident. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers. I needed help. Police, roadside services, anyone. But before I could even tap the screen, blinding headlights washed over me. I lifted my hand to shield my eyes. Then I felt it. A gloved hand clamped over my mouth. Strong, tight, smothering. My scream died in my throat. "Right, Ms. Amjad," a voice hissed in my ear. Too close, too warm, too familiar. "Hands behind your back." My entire body went cold. It was him. The same man who had been watching me for weeks. The same man from the driveway. Shock made my muscles lock up, but fear made me comply. Maybe if I did what he said, he'd leave me alive. Maybe if I didn't resist, he'd just... I don't know. I couldn't think. My mind was a mess of static and terror. He shoved a rag against my mouth, muffling my breath, and wrapped parcel tape around my head, around my wrists, binding them tightly behind my back. My muscles screamed against the pressure. "You should have smiled earlier," he muttered. "Would have made things easier." Those words hit harder than anything else, because they told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't random. He had been planning something. But he made one mistake. When he crouched to tape my legs, he loosened his grip for a split second. An instinct, months of kickboxing, hours of self-defense drills, took over. I jerked my knees free and kicked upward with every ounce of strength I had. My foot connected with a solid part of him, a vulnerable part. He let out a pained grunt and stumbled. I kicked again, this time his face, hard. He fell backward into the dirt with a sickening thud. My hands were still taped, but adrenaline made me stronger. I twisted, pulled, dug my nails into the tape until the skin around my wrists burned. With one final yank, I tore myself free. I scrambled for my phone, breath coming in sharp, painful bursts. My fingers shook as I dialed the police. "Help!" I gasped. "Please, someone tried to kidnap me." And for the first time that night, I let myself cry. The police arrived within minutes. Blue lights painted the cold street in flashing streaks, and officers swarmed the scene like a coordinated wave. I remember sitting on the curb, wrapped in a blanket, shivering not from cold but from the shock that still held my body hostage. They found him a few yards away, dazed and staggering. He didn't fight. He didn't even look at me. He just smirked like he assumed he'd be home by morning. He wasn't. The officers asked me question after question. What did he say? What did he do? Did I know him? Had he threatened me before? I answered as best as I could, though my thoughts kept spinning and doubling back. When they searched him, they found a small folding knife, more tape, gloves, and what looked like a wallet without identification. No real ID, no documentation, no hint of his identity beyond one name he offered them: Alec. Whether it was real or fake, I never found out. The neighbor, who had rented the house, claimed ignorance, said he didn't know the man well, that he felt sorry for him, that he was just letting him stay a while. But the police weren't buying it. When they went inside, they found proof Alec had been there for months. Clothes, personal items, even notes he'd scribbled about delivery times on our street. One note had my name written across the top. My throat tightened when they showed me. "He's been watching you," the officer said gently. "Studying your routine." Something inside me cracked then, knowing he hadn't just acted on impulse, that he had planned, observed, waited, made the fear settle deep into my bones. Later that night, when Imran rushed to the station and wrapped his arms around me, I broke in a way I didn't expect. Not loud, not dramatic. Just silent tears that soaked his jacket while he held me like he feared if he let go, I'd vanish. The investigation moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. My statement was strong. My injuries were documented. The tire had clear marks from a blade. Alec was charged with attempted kidnapping and assault. I attended the hearing through video call because of COVID restrictions. He didn't look at the camera once, but the judge did, and her words still echo in my memory. This was a deliberate act of predation. He was sentenced. Not long enough, in my opinion, but long enough that I could breathe again, or at least start learning how. People talk about survival like it's the end of the story. Like once you're safe, everything just resets. But healing isn't a switch. It's a long, uneven road paved with sleepless nights and unexpected panic. For months, I couldn't walk to my car without checking the driveway twice. Couldn't step outside without scanning every window, every shadow. My therapist told me it was normal. "Your mind is trying to protect you," she said. "It just hasn't learned the danger is over." Therapy helped. Talking helped. Kickboxing helped even more. I threw myself into training with a fierceness I didn't know I had. Each strike felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he tried to take. Imran was patient through all of it. He'd hold my hand at night when the nightmares woke me. He'd walk with me to the mailbox, stand beside me while I warmed up the car, never once making me feel weak for being scared. Over time, the house next door became empty. The tenant moved out months after the incident. Sometimes I'd stare at that dark window and shiver, remembering the feeling of being watched. But the fear softened. The memory dulled. I learned to live again, to trust again, to breathe without checking over my shoulder. And eventually, I realized something important. I survived because I fought back. But I healed because I allowed myself to accept help. Even today, years later, I still carry that night with me. Not as a shadow, not as a scar, but as a reminder that instinct is a lifeline. And courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act even when fear is screaming inside you. Trust your instincts. They're often the first warning your mind gives you when something is wrong. And remember, awareness, preparation, and self-defense can save your life, but reaching out for help is what helps you reclaim it. If you had told me a year ago that graduate school would lead me to hiding in a mountain pantry with a kitchen knife in one shaking hand and my phone in the other, I would have laughed. Back then, I was the kind of person who posted every study nook, every hike, every cozy morning on Instagram. Life felt simple, predictable, safe. When my program in Denver accepted me, I was thrilled. I'd always wanted to study environmental psychology, and being this close to the Rockies felt like the perfect backdrop for the next chapter of my life. Housing near campus was expensive, though, so I rented a small 2-bedroom cabin about 40 minutes up into the mountains. It was quiet, scenic, and surprisingly affordable, probably because it was isolated enough that you had to plan grocery trips like expeditions. My roommate Elise was studying wildlife biology and spent most weekends camping or traveling for field work. That meant I often had the place to myself, which I didn't mind. I liked the peace. I liked the way the wind sounded through the pines. I liked feeling removed from the noise of the city. But isolation hits differently when something feels wrong. It was late October, the air already bitter, the sky dark by the time I left campus. I was exhausted after a marathon day of presentations, but the thought of curling up in front of the fireplace kept me going. The drive up the mountain was quiet. So quiet, I turned the radio on just to fill the space. When I pulled into the driveway, I immediately noticed the cabin's porch light wasn't on. I usually left it on if I knew I'd be returning after dark. I convinced myself I'd forgotten, grabbed my backpack, and headed inside. The moment the door shut behind me, something felt off. I wish I had a better word for it, but that's really the only way to describe it. Off. Wrong in a way my body understood before my mind did. It wasn't until I walked into my bedroom and saw my lamp turned on, the lamp I always switched off before leaving, that my stomach tightened. And when I noticed the back door was unlocked, a cold shiver crawled up my spine. At first, I did what most people do. I reasoned with myself. I'd been tired this morning. Maybe I forgot to lock the door. Maybe I turned on the lamp to find my earrings. Maybe I kicked my hiking boots without realizing it. Maybe. But my brain couldn't ignore the uneasiness curling in my chest. Elise wasn't home. Her car wasn't even in the state. And I knew myself well enough to know I didn't just forget things like this. I dropped my backpack on the kitchen counter and tried to shake off the feeling. That's when my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. Motion detected. Back of property. The cabin had an old security system the owners installed years ago. Nothing fancy, just a basic motion sensor that sent automated alerts. Normally it caught raccoons or deer or the occasional nosy fox. But this time, I felt the alert in my bones. I walked slowly toward the back window, every step heavy. The porch light out back was dim, but enough to cast a muted glow onto the tree line. And then I saw him. A man in a heavy coat stood just beyond the trees, completely still, facing the cabin, watching. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment I honestly thought I was imagining it, until he shifted slightly, as if adjusting his footing. I backed away from the window so fast I bumped the table behind me. My hands trembled as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "There's someone outside my cabin," I whispered. "He's watching the house. I'm alone." "Is the person approaching you?" I don't know. I can't see him now." "Stay on the line with me. We're sending deputies. Do not go outside." I tried to focus on her voice, but my heartbeat was too loud, drowning out everything. A soft knock sounded at the back door. The air left my lungs in a sharp gasp. Then the knock came again, gentle, rhythmic, almost deliberate. The handle jiggled. My blood ran cold. Someone was trying to get in. "Ma'am, are you safe?" the dispatcher asked. "No," I whispered. "Someone's at the door. They're trying the handle." "Find a secure place in the house, somewhere with a lock." The pantry, small, windowless, tucked behind the kitchen shelves. I moved fast but quietly, phone pressed to my ear as I tiptoed across the floor. My hands shook as I shut myself inside and slid the bolt into place. Darkness swallowed the space except for the faint light from my phone. Outside, footsteps circled the house. Slow, unhurried, like whoever was out there wasn't worried about being caught. Then I heard a voice. A second man, whispering. My mouth went dry. "They study the layout," the dispatcher said suddenly after asking me to describe the cabin. "Don't talk, just listen. This might be important." Outside, the footsteps paused. Something scraped across the siding. The whispering grew clearer. "Basement window. Try it." Basement window. My heart dropped. The basement wasn't finished. The windows weren't reinforced. The locks were old. I'd always meant to tell the property owners, but it never felt urgent. Now it felt like life or death. A loud crack echoed through the house, the sound of glass breaking. I covered my mouth to stifle a scream. "They're inside," I whispered. "Deputies are close," the dispatcher said. "Stay silent. Do not move." I pressed myself against the far wall, the cold shelves digging into my back. My breath shook, barely controlled. I heard heavy footsteps downstairs, the creak of old wooden steps as they climbed, then rummaging, drawers opening, something crashing to the floor. They were searching. But for what? Or for who? One of the men whispered again, too soft to make out the words, but the tone carried something that made my skin crawl. Another sound split through the house, a shrill alarm from the security panel the intruders had tripped. And then, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Sirens. Faint, distant, but growing closer. The men bolted. I heard their footsteps thunder across the living room, out the way they came, and disappear into the woods. When the pantry door finally opened, a deputy's flashlight beam nearly blinded me. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're safe now." I'd never cried from relief before that night. I sat wrapped in a blanket on the porch stair while deputies inspected the damage: broken basement window, muddy footprints, fingerprints smudged along the back door. They moved methodically, talking in low tones, their radios crackling in the cold night air. One of them, Deputy Alvarez, crouched beside me. "This wasn't random," he said. "We've been tracking a group for months. 3 to 5 men targeting remote rentals used by women. They monitor listings online, figure out which properties are isolated, learn the floor plans from photos posted online. They pick dates when they think the woman will be alone." A chill rippled down my spine. How do they know who to target?" "Social media mostly," he said. "Photos of the interior, posts about being alone, anything that shows routine." My stomach sank. Suddenly every innocent post I'd made, showing the loft bed, the study corner, the little reading nook by the window, felt like a breadcrumb trail I didn't know I'd laid out. "We think they were watching the place earlier today," he continued. "Trying doors, looking through windows. They probably expected you to be gone longer." It made sense now. The lamp, the door. My boots moved. "Did they take anything?" I asked. He hesitated. "No," which tells us they weren't here for property. The meaning hung heavy in the night air. I swallowed hard. "Are you saying they were here for me?" His silence answered before his words did. "We believe so. And you did the right thing calling immediately. That may have saved your life." A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold. Deputies stayed at the cabin until nearly 3 a.m., exploring the woods, marking evidence, taking my statement. When they finally drove away, I realized there was no part of the house I wanted to sleep in. I didn't sleep that night at all. I didn't return to the cabin for several days. I stayed with a friend in Denver, barely able to close my eyes without imagining footsteps outside the door. The sheriff's office arranged extra patrols near the property, but the woods were too vast, the shadows too deep. Eventually, I had to decide whether to break my lease or go back. When I finally returned, it was daytime, bright, cold, and eerily quiet. The broken basement window had been boarded up, the security system had been upgraded, new locks were installed. Still, my chest tightened with anxiety as I walked through the door. Every creak, every gust of wind outside, every flicker of light made me flinch. My mind kept replaying the voices, the knocking, the moment I saw the figure in the tree line. I began therapy. I learned that trauma sits in your body like a weight that shifts when you least expect it. I learned that feeling paranoid after surviving something real isn't paranoia, it's memory. Slowly, I took steps to reclaim my space. I rearranged furniture, added brighter lighting, installed cameras, and stopped posting anything about where I lived or when I was alone. Elise returned from her fieldwork trip shocked and furious on my behalf, another anchor reminding me I wasn't surviving this alone. By the time winter settled into the mountains, the cabin felt a little less suffocating. Not safe exactly, never fully safe, but no longer a battleground in my mind. I don't know who those men were or where they went. Deputies said the group moved often, that catching them was complicated. But I do know something with absolute certainty. That night changed me, not into someone fearful, but someone aware. Someone who listens to the instinct I once brushed off. Someone who understands that safety isn't just doors and locks. It's knowing when your environment shifts, and believing your own alarm bells. Protect your privacy, online and offline. What feels harmless to share can become a map for someone with the wrong intentions. Trust your instincts, secure your space, and never underestimate the importance of awareness. I used to think moving to Colorado would fix everything. My stress, my loneliness, the way I sometimes felt like a ghost drifting through my own life. At 30, after burning out from years as a ranger in Utah, I wanted quiet. Real quiet. Not the artificial silence of soundproof walls in apartment buildings, or the numb quiet of exhaustion after a double shift. I wanted mountains, cold mornings, pine trees, and the kind of stillness that didn't feel like a threat. So when the Park Service offered me a position in a tiny mountain town called Pine Haven, I said yes before I had time to talk myself out of it. Mr. Denton appeared on day one like a character written just for a brochure. Polite, soft-spoken, silver-haired with a gentle western drawl that made him sound trustworthy by default. He rented me a 2-story house on the edge of town. Creaky porch, big backyard, windows that glowed gold in the afternoon light. It was the kind of place you'd paint on postcards, except for the locked room upstairs. "Oh, that one?" he'd said, jingling the keys but not offering that one. "Old structural problems. Floor isn't safe. Just leave it be." I didn't press him. I was tired. I just wanted a home. For the first week, life felt almost peaceful. I hiked every morning before work. I cooked real breakfasts. I slept more than I had in years, until the noises started. At first it was a soft thud behind the locked door. Maybe a shifting board, I told myself. Mountains get cold at night. Wood moves. But then I heard something dragging, slow, weighty, like someone pulling a heavy bag across the floor. One night around 2 a.m., I sat up in bed so fast my neck cracked. The sound had come again from the sealed room, but this time I could swear I heard breathing. Deep, controlled, human. I almost convinced myself it was my imagination. New house, strange nights, occasional wind. But then things started happening downstairs. My mug moved, my boots weren't where I left them, and once, my bedroom window was open despite being latched. And then came the night I returned home early and heard it clearly. A whisper from inside the locked room. Emily. My name. Spoken with a slow, practiced certainty. That was the moment I knew something was wrong with the house, and maybe with the man who owned it. I just didn't know how wrong yet. The day after I first heard the whisper, I barely slept. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the old furnace kicking on, the wind scraping branches along the siding. I spent the morning convincing myself I'd misheard, but the memory of that voice clung to me like a stain. At my ranger post, I tried to focus on paperwork and trail reports, but I kept replaying Denton's warning about the room. Structural issues. Maybe he meant something else and didn't want to say it aloud. When my shift ended, I drove straight to his place. He answered the door wearing that same soft expression he always had, like nothing in the world could trouble him. "Mr. Denton," I said, "I heard noises in the room you told me to stay out of." He blinked once, slowly. "Old houses settle," he said, "and that one's old. Shame you're letting it bother you, Emily." "I heard someone whisper my name." He didn't flinch, not even a twitch. "You work long hours, you're adjusting, your mind's playing tricks. The house gets lonely sometimes. People hear things." That phrase chilled me. The house gets lonely. I didn't argue. Something in his tone warned me not to. Instead, I thanked him, drove home, locked every door, and slept with my flashlight next to me like a kid afraid of the dark. The noises continued. Thuds, shuffles, something tapping against the wall from the inside. One night the whisper came again, closer, clearer. "Emily, let me out." I grabbed my phone but froze at the sight of the bedroom window wide open. Curtains fluttering, cold air spilling in. There were footprints on the porch roof outside, leading away into darkness, human ones. I reported it to the local sheriff the next morning, but Pine Haven law enforcement consisted of one man named Sheriff Laramie, who looked half asleep even at 9 a.m. "Probably raccoons," he said, sipping coffee. "They open windows sometimes." "Raccoons don't whisper," I said. He chuckled. "You'd be surprised what you hear living alone." I left his office angrier than I expected, but underneath the anger was fear. Not the kind that made me jump at shadows. The kind that made me feel hunted. That night, lying awake, I realized something. Whoever was whispering my name wasn't trying to scare me. They were waiting for me to respond. On my 9th night in the house, I snapped. Fear had been building like pressure in a pipe, subtle at first, then sharp, then unbearable. Every sound from the locked room made my skin crawl. I couldn't eat, could barely sleep, and the worst part was feeling watched even when the hall was empty. I had to know what was in that room. I waited until midnight, when the house felt the most awake. I stood outside the sealed door with a hammer and chisel I'd borrowed from the ranger station. My heart pounded so loud I worried whoever, or whatever, was inside would hear it. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Not quiet. Silence. Too perfect. Too deliberate. I wedged the chisel under the lock and hit it once. Twice. 3 times. The old metal snapped. The door creaked open a few inches, spilling out a smell I couldn't place. Stale air, sweat, maybe even something metallic. The room looked ordinary, dusty, abandoned. No furniture except a collapsed cot and a shelf. Cracks in the wall. But the floorboards near the far corner looked newer, less worn. I walked closer. The board shifted slightly under my weight. A hidden seam. I knelt, slid my fingers along the edge, and pried it up. Beneath it was a wooden handle attached to a trapdoor. My breath caught. This wasn't a room with structural issues. This was an entrance. I opened the hatch, and a cold draft rose from below. The staircase was narrow, steep, and swallowed by darkness. I turned on my flashlight and climbed down. The cellar wasn't like anything I expected. It wasn't for storage. There were blankets tucked behind crates, food wrappers, empty water bottles, a sleeping area. Someone had been living here. But the worst part was the wall opposite the stairs. It was covered in vents, small, precise openings cut directly into the walls of the house. I stepped closer, shining my light inside one. I could see my bedroom, not a shadow of it, not a vague outline, a clear, direct view. He had been watching me the entire time. On a small table near the vents was a folder, dusty, thick. I opened it and nearly dropped it. Photographs, dozens, previous tenants, men, women, young, old, all smiling at the camera, all standing in the house I now lived in. A few pages later, newspaper clippings, missing persons, all associated with this address. I turned to leave, shaking, but a shape moved behind me at the top of the stairs. Mr. Denton. I told you the room wasn't safe, he said softly. You should have listened. My flashlight flickered when Denton stepped down the stairs, one slow foot at a time, like he had rehearsed it. His eyes weren't angry. They were calm, almost pitying. I didn't want it to be you, he murmured. You seemed respectful, quiet. Good renters are hard to come by. Get away from me, I hissed, backing up until my spine hit the table with the photographs. I'm not your enemy, Emily. His voice was so soft it made my stomach twist. The house. It gets lonely. It keeps people. Holds on to them. I only help it finish what it starts. You're sick, I whispered. He smiled. Maybe. But this home has fed my life for 30 years. You think a man survives isolation by accident? I looked for a weapon. Anything. My hand brushed a heavy metal thermos left on the ground by whoever lived down here. Before Denton could step closer, I swung it hard. It hit his shoulder, not his head, but enough to stagger him. I bolted up the stairs. He grabbed my ankle on the last step, yanking hard. I slammed onto the wood, pain shooting up my leg. I kicked blindly until my heel connected with his jaw. He let go, cursing under his breath. I sprinted down the hall. He wasn't fast, but he was steady, predictable, like a man who'd done this many times before. I grabbed my keys, ran outside, jumped into my Jeep, and peeled out onto the dirt road. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the wheel. I didn't stop driving until Pine Haven's small cluster of buildings came into view. The sheriff's office was locked. It was past midnight, but I banged on the door until Sheriff Laramie stumbled out half-dressed. When I told him everything, he stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You broke into a sealed room because you heard noises, he muttered. And now your landlord is trying to kill you. Emily, this is a small town. Denton's harmless. He has vents in my walls, I shouted. A hidden room. People have gone missing. That got his attention. Barely. He radioed a deputy and told me to wait at the station. Half an hour later, he came back pale. Emily, he said quietly. There's no one at the house. What? Denton's gone. Completely gone. That was the moment I realized the truth. He had been waiting for me to leave, so he could disappear before anyone else knew what he really was. The investigation turned Pine Haven upside down. The cellar, the vents, the photographs. Laramie apologized to me a dozen times. The FBI came. Search teams combed the woods and the mountains for Denton, but he knew the terrain better than anyone. He was never found. I moved into temporary housing while the house was processed as a crime scene. Some agents called it a shrine. Others called it a hunting ground. I called it something simpler, a place built to make people disappear. Weeks passed, then months. Winter fell over the mountains, and the town carried on like it always had. People whispered about the case in the diner. Parents locked their doors earlier. But life returned to normal eventually, except for mine. I kept thinking about the folder, the faces, the missing tenants who had walked into that house believing they were safe. I thought about how many times I had stood in front of my bedroom mirror, unaware of the eyes behind the wall. And I thought about Denton's final words before he vanished. The house keeps people. Sometimes I wondered if that meant he wasn't the only thing living there. After 6 months, I transferred out of Pine Haven. I packed my Jeep, drove past the mountains one last time, and told myself I'd never look back. But occasionally, during late-night shifts in my new post, the memory of that whisper returns. Soft, patient. Emily. Like it followed me. Like it never belonged to Denton at all. Evil doesn't always break down your door. Sometimes it hands you the keys and tells you the place is safe. Trust your instincts, question what doesn't feel right, and never ignore the small signs. They are often the warnings that save your life. I never thought buying a house alone in my early 30s would feel like both an accomplishment and a punishment. After years of renting tiny apartments in Denver, paper-thin walls, street noise at all hours, neighbors who fought loudly about the same 3 things, I wanted quiet. Space. A place I could finally call mine without worrying about lease renewals or deposits. So when I found a 2-story place on a rural road outside a town called Willow Bend, it felt like a sign. Affordable, secluded, old but solid. The kind of house that smelled like pine floors and late autumn. A house with creaks that meant character, not danger. At least that's what I told myself when I signed the papers. The first week was supposed to be peaceful. I unpacked slowly, taking my time with every box, putting things where I actually wanted them. I painted one wall, repaired a cabinet hinge, felt proud in small, quiet ways. It wasn't until the first stormy night that the house began to feel off. Wind rattled the shutters, rain hammered the roof, and lightning lit the hallway in quick, sharp flashes. I was crouched on the living room floor unpacking books when I heard it. Soft footsteps above me. Slow, measured, like someone walking carefully across old floorboards. I froze and stared at the ceiling. The attic entrance sat in the upstairs hallway, sealed shut with paint so old it had fused the hatch to the frame. The inspector had told me no one had been up there in decades. At first, I convinced myself it was lumber expanding. Storms do weird things to old houses. But the footsteps didn't shift randomly. They paced. 5 steps one direction. Pause. 5 steps back. My heart started racing. I turned up the TV, trying to drown it out. But another thunderclap hit, and the lights flickered. The footsteps stopped abruptly, like whoever, or whatever, was up there had paused to listen. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed halfway up the attic ladder. The hatch groaned as I pushed it open a few inches. Dust drifted down like old snow. I shined the light inside. Just boxes, cobwebs, silence. I closed the hatch, climbed down, and tried to laugh at myself. New house, storm, imagination. But later, long after the footsteps stopped, I still felt uneasy. As if the house wasn't empty, as if someone else had already claimed it long before I arrived. I told myself the storm had made the house act strange, that old wood complained in bad weather, that loneliness had a way of playing tricks on the mind. But the next night, the strange sounds came back, and this time they were more deliberate. I was brushing my teeth, standing barefoot on the cold tile of the upstairs bathroom, when I heard it. Breathing. Faint, slow, steady. At first, I thought it was coming from the vent. Maybe the wind tunneling through the ducts. But as I leaned closer, I realized the sound wasn't metallic or hollow. It was warm, human. It was coming from inside the wall behind my bedroom. My whole body went cold. I stood perfectly still, toothbrush hanging out of my mouth like an idiot. The breathing grew slightly louder, and then came a dragging sound. Long, rough, like something heavy being pulled across insulation and beams. It moved down the length of the house. I backed away from the wall, heart pounding. Nope, I whispered to myself, like the word could banish fear. I grabbed my phone and called the only neighbor I'd met so far, a retired guy named Hank who lived a quarter-mile down the road. He picked up on the second ring. "Everything okay over there?" he asked. "Not really," I said. "I think there's something, or someone, in my walls." He didn't laugh. "Stay on the phone. I'm coming." As we talked, the drag sounded again, closer this time, as if whatever was in there knew I wasn't alone anymore. Then came the heavy thump, right inside the crawl space behind my closet, the kind of sound a human body makes when it accidentally bumps into something it didn't expect. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "I heard it," Hank said. "Don't go near it. I'm turning into your driveway now." I checked the front window. His truck wasn't there yet. But the second I stepped back into the hallway, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. My bedroom door handle was turning. Slowly, cautiously, like someone testing it, then realizing it was locked. The handle stopped. Silence returned. Hank banged on the front door seconds later, shouting my name. I ran downstairs to let him in. He rushed inside, flashlight raised, scanning the hall. Something inside my walls shifted one last time, almost a sigh, and then everything went still. But the quiet didn't comfort me. It felt like hiding. Hank insisted we call the police immediately, but part of me felt ridiculous. What would I even say? "Hi, I think my house is breathing." But after what we'd heard over the phone, and what I'd seen with my own eyes, Hank didn't give me the option. Deputy Mallory arrived first. Younger than I expected, steady voice, but uneasy the second he stepped inside. "You said the noises were coming from upstairs?" he asked. "Inside the walls," I said, "and the attic." He raised an eyebrow. "No sign of forced entry outside." "Because they didn't come through the outside," Hank muttered. Mallory sighed like he thought we were overreacting, but he followed us upstairs anyway. I pointed to the closet where the thump happened. He tapped the wall with his flashlight. Hollow. He crouched, shining the light along the baseboard. "What the hell?" "Tiny pry marks. Fresh. Someone's been messing with this panel," he said. He wedged a flathead screwdriver into the gap and pulled. The panel popped off with a groan of old wood. A rush of cold air seeped out. The crawl space was dark, narrow and deep, far larger than any I'd seen. Dust and insulation lay disturbed, not evenly settled. Someone had definitely moved through here. Mallory crawled inside with his flashlight. "Stay here," he said. But Hank muttered, "Like hell," and crouched nearby, ready to help. I stood frozen, listening to Mallory shuffle deeper and deeper into the space. A full minute passed before he called out. "I found something." He backed out holding a gray hoodie, filthy, sweat-stained, human-sized, and then he said something that made my stomach drop. "This opening goes straight into the attic." I stared at him. "That attic is sealed shut." Mallory shook his head. "Not the part I just found." He told us to stay where we were as he headed to the attic entrance in the hall. He chipped away at the paint with his pocket knife, enough to pry open the hatch. Dust spilled out, and he climbed up. A moment later, Jesus. What? I called up. There's a panel missing in the back corner. It leads directly into the crawl space. Someone's been moving between both. Hank cursed under his breath. Then where are they now? Mallory didn't answer. Not immediately. Then from the attic, a vent's been pushed out. My breath caught. Meaning? Meaning, he said, voice low. They got out. Probably during the storm. Footsteps behind the walls, breathing inches from my bed, the handle turning. The house hadn't been haunted. It had been occupied by someone who knew how to live where no one would look. And now, they were gone. The next few hours blurred into police lights, boots on stairs, radios crackling, and officers searching every inch of the property. They found no intruder, no belongings aside from the hoodie, no fingerprints worth lifting. Whoever had been living in my attic and walls had vanished into the night. A detective named Ramirez interviewed me in the kitchen. Did you notice anything unusual during your first week? I laughed bitterly. How much time do you have? He gave me that calm, I've heard worse look. Let's start with the footsteps. I explained everything. The pacing overhead, the breathing, the dragging, the thump. Ramirez listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, he asked, "Why didn't you call sooner?" I thought I was imagining things. His pen stopped moving. This happens more than you'd think. People don't trust their instincts. Hank stood nearby with his arms crossed. Or they're afraid they'll sound crazy. We walked the house again with Ramirez. When he reached the attic, he pointed at the back corner. "You see this?" he said. The panel wasn't just pried open. It had been removed carefully, slowly, over time. Not a brute force escape. A planned exit. "Judging by the dust pattern," Ramirez said, crouching, "they've been here for months. Maybe years." I felt sick. He continued. "Somebody lived up here, ate up here, slept up here, and I'm willing to bet they watched you move in and tried to figure out how long they could stay." I wrapped my arms around myself. "Do you think they'll come back?" Ramirez didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Most don't, but some return to familiar places." Hank put a hand on my shoulder. "You're staying at my place tonight, non-negotiable." I didn't argue. As we left, I paused in the doorway and looked back at the house. The lights glowed warmly through the windows, inviting, safe-looking. A lie. A place doesn't feel like home when you're not the only one living in it. I never spent another night in that house. Not one. Over the next week, I packed everything I could during daylight hours, always with someone beside me. First Hank, then my sister. Then finally a moving crew who didn't ask many questions once they heard the police tape story. Detective Ramirez checked in twice during that time. "Still no sign of the person," he said. "We circulated the hoodie and footprint measurements to nearby counties, but nothing matches." "Do you think they picked the house because it was rural?" I asked. He hesitated. "Honestly, they picked it because it was easy, quiet, secluded, and they knew you wouldn't notice them right away." Not comforting. The house felt different after knowing the truth. The walls seemed thinner, the air colder. Even during the day, I felt like someone was peering from behind the vents, watching me box up my belongings. I kept replaying everything. The footsteps, the breathing, the handle turning, the moments I brushed off as old house noises, the times I felt uneasy but ignored the feeling because I didn't want to be dramatic. Ramirez walked me out on my last visit. "If you want advice," he said quietly, "don't blame yourself. Someone who knows how to live unseen can slip into almost any home. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong." "But I didn't leave," I said. "Not until it got bad." "That's what fear does," he said. "It argues with instinct." I moved to a townhouse closer to town. Smaller, louder, shared walls, neighbors I could hear laughing through the vents. And for the first time, I appreciated that sound. Noise meant life. Noise meant people. Noise meant I wasn't alone with someone hiding just out of sight. Sometimes at night I still think about that house, about the footsteps that paced directly overhead, about the breathing I felt, not heard, about the unknown person who lived inches from me without making a sound. And I wonder if they ever watched me through a crack in the wall, deciding whether they should stay or leave. The police never found them. And that, more than anything, is what keeps me awake sometimes. Because people don't just vanish. They go somewhere. Someone else's attic. Someone else's walls. Someone else's quiet house that seems too peaceful to be true. I bought the house because I was tired of temporary living. Tired of rotating apartments, of noisy neighbors, of feeling like my life was stuck in the waiting room of adulthood. I wanted roots, stability, a small place near the coastline where I could hear the ocean when I cracked the window at night. The fixer-upper on Willow Shore Lane wasn't perfect, but it had personality. Soft blue shutters, scuffed hardwood floors, and a basement that smelled like sea salt and old concrete. It felt lived in, but not haunted, at least not at first. When I moved in, I told myself the place just needed love. A few repairs, some paint, maybe a sturdier railing on the stairs. I didn't mind the quirks. The sticky front door, the humming pipes, even the old basement door that didn't quite latch unless I leaned my whole weight on it. The first morning I found it slightly ajar. I blamed the humidity. The coastline does strange things to wood. The second time it happened, I shrugged and told myself I probably forgot to lock it. But the third time, the basement door was wide open, a faint damp smell drifting up the stairs like the ocean itself had crept inside. I stood there for a long moment, staring into the dark. "Great," I muttered. A raccoon moved in before I did. I bought a cheap motion sensor camera online, set it up at the bottom of the stairs. The app pinged my phone every night around 2 or 3 a.m. Movement detected, but every clip was blank, just a grainy room, empty. So it's the house settling, I told myself, or bugs, or the camera's glitching. But then came the footprints. Damp, bare, human. They appeared on the concrete floor near the water heater, and each time I found them, my stomach dropped a little lower. They didn't belong to me. I rarely went down barefoot, and they were too large anyway. I tried to convince myself it was condensation, maybe a leak, something logical. But deep down, something in me tightened with a quiet, unsettling certainty. Someone knew this house better than I did, and someone else had been here long before I arrived. I tried not to jump to conclusions. Houses have drafts. Basements hold moisture. Strange noises happen. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, especially on nights when the coastline fog rolled in thick and slow. One evening after work, I walked into the kitchen and felt that unmistakable sensation of being observed. I looked out the window, half expecting someone to be standing in the yard. Nothing but the dusk settling over the grass. I decided I needed answers. I bought stronger locks, reinforced the basement door, and sprinkled flour near the entrance, thinking I'd catch an animal. If I wasn't dealing with something human, I wanted proof. The next morning, the flour was untouched, but the basement door was open again. "What the hell?" I whispered. The warped frame theory suddenly felt flimsy. I never heard the door creak open during the night, which meant someone, or something, was opening it quietly. I called my friend Layla. She was an emergency care worker who'd seen her fair share of frightening situations, and she listened with a seriousness I didn't expect. "You need to be careful," she said. "During the pandemic, I had someone track my routines. He almost got into my house." "What?" I asked, thinking she was exaggerating, but she wasn't. She told me about the neighbor's empty home, about the man hiding inside, watching her deliveries and schedules, how he tried to attack her, how she had to fight him off. The line went quiet for a moment. "Mia," she said softly, "people hide in places you wouldn't believe." Her voice lingered with me long after the call ended. That same night, I heard something in the basement. A shuffle, a soft thud. definitely too heavy for an animal. My throat tightened. I sat at the top of the stairs holding my phone like a shield. "Go away," I whispered to the dark. "Whoever you are, just go away." No reply. No footsteps retreating, only silence. Eventually, I forced myself to walk back to bed, but I barely slept. Every creak felt deliberate. Every shadow seemed to breathe. The house was no longer just quirky. It was reactive, like it was listening. And this time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know the truth. The night the power went out, the house felt wrong from the moment the lights died. The storm outside was brutal. Wind that sounded like it was peeling the siding off. Rain hammering the windows. Thunder rattling the dishes in the cabinets. I grabbed my lantern and headed for the basement, because of course the breaker panel was down there. I hated that basement more than anything, but the refrigerator was already clicking ominously, and I didn't want to lose power all night. The lantern cast long, shaky shadows on the walls as I descended the stairs. The air felt colder, wetter, heavier. Halfway down, I froze. Someone was breathing in the dark. Not the quiet, accidental kind. This was ragged, deliberate, like someone trying and failing to stay calm. I lifted the lantern higher. That's when I saw him. A man crouched behind the water heater, his thin body half hidden in the shadow of the pipes. His eyes were wide and terrified, as if I were the intruder, not him. "Please don't scream," he whispered. I stumbled backward, hitting the railing. Who are you?" He held up trembling hands. "I'm not here to hurt you." His clothes were dirty. His face was pale, hollow. He clutched a notebook to his chest like it was a life raft. The lantern light revealed pages filled with pencil sketches. Me unlocking the front door. Me cooking dinner. Me taking out the trash. Every angle of my life written in graphite. My stomach turned. "You've been living here?" His eyes darted to a section of wall behind him. A small panel, slightly ajar. A storage nook I never knew existed. "I grew up here," he said softly. "This was my room. Before they sealed it up. Before they left." "That was 40 years ago," I said. "You can't just—" "I thought they came back," he whispered. "I thought you were them." I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or run. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the lantern. "Please," he said again. I didn't know where else to go. But I didn't believe him. Not entirely. Because the sketches weren't nostalgic. They were observant, meticulous, and he didn't look like someone simply revisiting childhood memories. He looked like someone who'd been hiding, watching, planning. When the police arrived, 2 officers guided him up the stairs in handcuffs. He didn't fight, didn't beg. He just kept looking back at me with this haunted expression, like I was the one tearing him out of a place he believed he belonged. Detective Ryder introduced himself, a tall man with tired eyes. "We'll take him in for evaluation," he said. "We already radioed in. There's a missing persons report for him from a town 10 miles away." "What was he doing here?" I asked, hugging my arms to keep them from shaking. "We'll know more after we talk to him," Ryder said gently. But from what we saw downstairs, he wasn't living well. I led him back to the basement, lantern still flickering. Ryder examined the small panel behind the water heater. "This wasn't just a storage nook," he said, pushing the panel open. "This is an old renovation cavity, probably sealed off and forgotten." Inside was a narrow space just large enough for a sleeping bag, a stack of canned food, and more notebooks. I didn't open any of them. I couldn't. Ryder gave a quiet whistle. "He's been here a long time." "How long?" I asked. "Hard to say," he replied, "but long enough to know your routine." I swallowed hard. "He said he grew up here." Ryder nodded. "Records show his family lived on this street. Not in your house, though, in one that burned down years ago. I think he latched onto yours because it looked similar. I felt a chill deep in my bones. So he thought this was home? Maybe at first, Ryder said. Then he got comfortable. The officers cleared the basement and took photos. One pointed out the footprints, damp from condensation, but undeniably human. He'd been creeping out during storms, probably because the sound masked his movement. After they left, I stood alone at the top of the basement stairs. The lantern cast a pool of gold on the concrete below. The water heater hummed. The panel stood open like a wound in the house. Every instinct told me not to go down there again. A house can be repaired. Foundations can be fixed. But once shadows get inside your mind, they don't leave easily. I turned off the lantern, shut the door, and locked it with trembling hands. I didn't stay long after that. I tried. God knows I tried to convince myself the danger was gone. But the house had absorbed too much. Too many secrets. Too many nights of footsteps and damp footprints, and that man's eyes staring up at me like I'd stolen something from him. The basement felt like it was holding its breath. Detective Ryder called me the next day. "He's stable," he said. He wasn't violent, more confused than anything. "And the notebooks?" I asked. "They're complicated. A mix of memories, drawings, and detailed notes about your routine." I pressed my hand to my forehead. "Why me?" "He said you moved like his mother," Ryder answered. "That you reminded him of someone he used to follow from room to room when he was a child." I nearly dropped the phone. "You're safe now," he added. "But I'd advise staying with someone for a few days. Trauma doesn't disappear overnight." He wasn't wrong. I slept at Layla's house for the rest of the week. She made tea, kept lights on, and didn't ask questions unless I felt like talking. She understood fear more intimately than most people ever will. "You survived," she told me one night. "That's the part you need to remember." But the hardest part wasn't what happened. It was trusting my own home again. I listed the house a month later, disclosed everything. A young contractor bought it. Someone who wasn't afraid of dark corners and sealed panels. Someone who believed walls were just walls. I envied him. I moved into a sunny apartment near the city, smaller, busier, brighter. I bought new locks, new curtains, and motion lights that clicked on if a fly sneezed. Sometimes when I'm alone, I think I hear a soft shuffle behind me. But when I turn around, it's nothing, just leftover fear masquerading as memory. Still, I keep the lights on a little longer than I used to, and I never ignore strange noises, not anymore. Because now I know the truth. Not every ghost is dead. Some are just lost, wandering back to the places they once called home. Trust your instincts, secure your space, and never assume a locked door means you're truly alone. Awareness is not paranoia. Sometimes it's the only thing standing between safety and danger. People think nurses get used to strange hours, but you never really adjust. You just learn to live between other people's time zones. I work nights at a suburban hospital just north of Denver, and after 10 years of 12-hour shifts, I built routines to keep myself sane. My weirdest one, 2 a.m. runs. It started as stress relief. The lake trail near my apartment was lit by those soft amber lamps that make everything look warm even when the air is freezing. The path was paved, quiet, predictable. No dogs, no kids, no retirees speed walking with elbow pads. Just me, my breath, and the sound of sneakers hitting concrete. I always felt safe out there. Safer than most places, actually. Working in emergency care makes you hyper-aware of danger. You learn what people look like before they snap, before they hurt someone. You learn the difference between off and unsafe. So I trusted my instincts when they said the lake was safe. Normal. Mine. Until the night it wasn't. It was late September. the kind of cold that reaches into your bones and twists. Fog drifted low across the water. I tugged my hoodie tight, shoved my earbuds in, and started my usual loop. On my second lap, I noticed him. A man standing ankle-deep in the lake, tall, thin, facing away from me, shoulders stiff and squared. He didn't move, not even when a breeze cut across the water. I slowed down, pulled a single earbud out. "Hey, you okay?" I called. No reaction. He stood as still as a tree trunk planted in the shallows. I walked a few steps closer. "Sir?" Nothing. When I finally ran past him, his arm lifted, slowly, deliberately, as if he were listening for something I couldn't hear. My stomach tightened. By the time I completed the next lap, he was gone. In his place, a trail of wet footprints leading from the lake onto the path, straight toward the woods. Footprints that stopped at the tree line as if he'd vanished into thin air. A chill slid down my spine. Something in me whispered that I should have stopped running the moment I saw him, because that night, I wasn't the only one awake at 2 a.m., and I wasn't the only one watching. I tried to shake it off, really I did. People wander into lakes. Mental health crises happen. Drunks stumble home by taking questionable routes. I've treated all kinds of strange situations on shift, but something about the man in the water felt wrong in a way I couldn't diagnose. By the time I finished my run, the fog was thicker. The lake had gone completely silent. Even the ducks seemed to be hiding. I quickened my pace back to the parking lot, my mind replaying the moment he raised his arm like he was sensing me instead of hearing me. I drove home with the heater blasting, trying to stop my hands from shaking. "You're overreacting," I whispered to myself. He's long gone. My apartment complex was quiet when I arrived. Lights off in every unit. I took the back staircase to the 3rd floor, unlocked my door, and did my usual after-run routine: shower, protein shake, stretching. I almost managed to forget him. Almost. 5 minutes later, a soft tapping started on my window. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps again. My muscles went rigid. I stepped to the side, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. I pulled the curtain back an inch, just enough to look. And there he was, the man from the lake, standing outside my 3rd floor window, dripping wet, his face inches from the glass. He stared at me with eyes that didn't blink, didn't widen, didn't track movement. It was like staring into the face of someone who hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. I stumbled backward, grabbed my phone, and called 911. "He's outside my window, 3rd floor," I whispered. "He's not talking. He's just watching." "Is he attempting to break in?" the dispatcher asked. "No, but stay inside. Officers are on the way." The tapping stopped. He didn't leave. He just stood there, unmoving. 5 long minutes later, I heard footsteps on the stairwell and saw flashlights sweeping across the courtyard. When 2 officers appeared, the man calmly stepped away from the window and walked behind the building. No hurry, no panic, just a steady, deliberate retreat, like he'd planned every second. When the officers knocked, I opened the door with shaking hands. One asked, "Where did he go?" "Behind the building," I said. "He walked away when he saw you." The officers split up to search the complex. I paced the living room, pulling the curtain back every few seconds. The trail of water he left glistened under the walkway lights. The older officer returned 20 minutes later. "We didn't find him," he said, "but based on your statement, unless he attempted entry, threatened you, or damaged property, we can't detain him." I stared at him. "He followed me home." "We don't know that for sure. He was standing in the lake at 2 in the morning. Still not a crime. He climbed to my 3rd floor window. Could have come up the stairs. Again, not a crime unless he tries to enter." I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, "So what am I supposed to do?" "Call us if he comes back. Document everything, and keep your blinds closed." That was it. That was all they could offer. After they left, my apartment felt smaller, like the walls were shrinking. Every appliance hum made me jump. An hour passed. I tried to convince myself he was gone for good, but when I went to lock the back door, I froze. Small, wet handprints were smeared across the glass, low on the door, far lower than an adult man would place them. It looked like he had crouched, watched, waited. My chest tightened. No, no, no. The handprints trailed along the siding outside, circling the entire building. He hadn't left when the police arrived. He'd only hidden, and then he came back to check every door, every window, every possible way in. He wasn't trying to break laws. He was trying to learn me. And I realized something horrifying. He wasn't confused, or lost, or mentally unstable. He was deliberate, and he had followed my entire running route. Every turn, every street, he knew exactly where I lived, and exactly how to get back. I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. I left every light on, sat with my back against the kitchen cabinets, and held my phone like a weapon. Every hour, I checked the windows. Every shadow felt too still. Every silence sounded like footsteps. At 6 a.m., I called my manager at the hospital to report that I wouldn't make it to shift. She didn't ask for details. She just told me to stay safe. Night shift nurses have a strong unspoken rule. We don't question each other's bad nights. Layla, another nurse friend, showed up with coffee the moment I texted her. She had the kind of presence that steadied the air in a room. "You look wrecked," she said gently. "Tell me everything." I recapped the man, the lake, the window, the handprints. Her face darkened. "You know he followed your scent trail," she said. "People like that, they track behavior." "I don't even know who he is," I whispered. "Doesn't matter. He watched you long enough to memorize your route, and he knew where to find your building. He wasn't guessing." I nodded, throat tight. "What did the police say?" she asked. "That he didn't commit a crime." She shook her head. "Then you're not staying here tonight." She helped me pack an overnight bag. I felt exposed being near the windows, like eyes were pressed to the glass. Before we left, I checked the back door one last time. The handprints were still there, smaller than mine, spread unevenly, like he'd leaned close to listen. "What did he want?" I asked out loud. Layla looked at me with steady eyes. "Doesn't matter. What matters is what you do next." We drove to her place, a gated complex with cameras everywhere. Only then did my heart begin to slow. Later that afternoon, missing persons reports from surrounding counties were scanned. No one matched his description. No complaints, no sightings. It was like he didn't exist, like he'd appeared from the lake water itself. I kept imagining him standing ankle-deep at the shoreline, waiting for something only he could hear. And I wondered, did he pick me at random? Or was he waiting for me? I never ran at 2 a.m. again. I still ran, but only in daylight, only with friends, and only in public places with actual people in sight. Layla stuck with me for every run the first few weeks, refusing to let me out of her sight. The apartment complex installed brighter lights near the back door. The manager sent out a notice advising residents to avoid late-night parking lots. No one said it, but everyone felt it. The lake trail became busier, even at odd hours. News spreads quickly in small suburbs, especially when a story sounds like something that could happen to anyone. The police did patrols for a while. They didn't catch him. One officer told me quietly, "Sometimes people like that surface when they need something, then disappear when they're done." I hated the way he phrased it. Done sounded too deliberate, too personal. I moved apartments 3 months later, farther away, higher floor, indoor hallways, key-coded building. I haven't seen him since. No shadow at my window, no wet footprints. no handprints smeared across glass. But sometimes, when I jog past a lake, or hear water dripping, or see someone standing too still, I feel a prickle crawl up the back of my neck. Because he never tried to break in, never tried to speak, never made a sound. He only watched, followed, learned. And people like that don't stop because the police tell them to go home. They stop because they choose someone else, or because they're waiting for the right moment to reappear. I don't know which possibility is worse, but I lock my doors now, every night, without fail. And I never, ever run alone in the dark. People say college is supposed to be the loudest time of your life. Parties, roommates, chaos. Mine wasn't like that. I came to the Oregon coast to escape noise, not chase it. I was a second-year marine biology major at a small state college, and I'd rented half of a duplex about a mile from the shoreline. It wasn't fancy. Peeling gray paint, slanted porch steps, a roof that groaned every time the wind shifted, but it was quiet, cheap, and close to campus. I told myself the storms would become part of the charm. The first week proved I was wrong. The wind on the coast didn't just howl, it shoved the world around. My duplex shook like it was caught in the hands of something giant and irritated. Still, after a few nights, I got used to it. Cozy, actually. A hot mug of coffee, textbooks spread out across the kitchen table, rain hammering the windows. It was a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. Until the night the noise changed. It was almost midnight during midterm week, and I was half asleep reading about intertidal zones when I heard it, something dragging slowly above my head. A long, low scrape followed by a dull thud, then silence. I froze in my chair listening. Wind? Maybe a loose gutter? Maybe a branch? But branches don't drag. I tried to focus on studying, but the noise returned, this time closer to the center of the ceiling, like something heavy shifting its weight directly overhead. Great, I muttered. Roof problems. Exactly what I need. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, the wind immediately grabbing at my clothes. My phone's flashlight flicked across the roofline. Nothing obviously wrong, but when I walked around the side of the house, something caught my eye. A vent, square, metal, low to the roofline, had been crudely boarded over. Not screwed, not sealed. Boarded. Sloppily, like whoever did it was in a rush. I stared at it longer than I should have, a cold feeling crawling up my spine. I'd lived there 2 months. How had I never noticed it? The dragging sound echoed again, muffled this time, and I felt the vibration under my shoes. Not the roof, the crawl space. Someone was beneath me. I didn't investigate that night. I told myself it was an animal. Maybe raccoons, maybe possums, maybe my imagination. But I didn't sleep. Every time I drifted off, I heard that dragging sound replay in my mind, and I knew it wasn't an animal. The next morning, sunlight made the duplex look normal again, less haunted, more weather-beaten. I convinced myself the night had exaggerated everything. I had exams to worry about, not phantom noises. But as I tossed my laundry into the washer that afternoon, something felt different about the room. The floor dipped slightly near the back wall, and the dryer vent looked off, too high, too far from the corner. My landlord had warned me the place had strange quirks from past renovations, but this felt like more than a quirk. I pushed aside a stack of old paint cans left by the previous tenant, and that's when I saw it. A seam in the floorboards, a faint square outline, a hidden hatch. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered. I pulled on the edge, expecting it to be stuck forever, but it lifted easily, almost too easily. Beneath it was a dark opening no wider than my shoulders. Dirt floor, wooden beams, a cold draft that smelled like wet soil and metal. The dragging sound from the night before echoed in my memory. "Okay," I told myself. "You're just checking. just being responsible. I lowered myself in, phone light cutting a narrow white path through the darkness. The crawl space stretched under the full length of the duplex. I could hear the ocean faintly in the distance, muffled by earth. My heart thudded louder with each inch forward. 10 feet in, I saw it. A blanket, a pillow, empty cans stacked in a corner like someone had been quietly collecting them, and behind it all, the outline of something lying on its side. My breath caught. A person. Motionless. I almost turned back. Almost bolted. But my phone light swept across the shape, illuminating it fully. A man. Thin. Dirty. Hair matted. His hands folded under his chin like a sleeping child. For a moment I thought he was dead. Then he rose, slowly, simply, silently, to his knees, and began crawling toward me. My scream caught in my throat as I scrambled backward, dirt flying behind me in frantic kicks. His hands dragged across the ground, reaching, closing the distance with terrifying calm. I lunged upward through the hatch, slammed it shut, dragged the washer on top of it, and collapsed against the wall with shaking hands. He was down there, and he had been there for weeks. I don't remember dialing 911. I only remember the operator's voice cutting through my panic. "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" "I don't know. Someone's under my house." He came at me. I didn't know he was living there. Please just send someone." "Stay where you are. Lock the door. Officers are on the way." I did exactly what she said. I locked the laundry room door, then locked the bedroom door, then sat with my back against the wall gripping my phone until my knuckles turned white. Every noise made me jump. The hum of the fridge, the groan of the wind, the faint scratching I thought I heard beneath the floorboards. What if he was trying to get out? What if the hatch wasn't strong enough? I pressed my ear to the floor. Nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. Nothing but the sound of my own pulse thudding in my ears. 15 minutes later, there was a pounding at the front door. "Police!" I practically tore it off its hinges, opening it. 2 officers stepped inside, hands on their flashlights. "Where is he?" one asked. "Crawl space," I said, pointing to the laundry room. "He was living under there. I saw his bed, his things. He came at me on his hands and knees." The officers exchanged a look I recognized. The maybe he's overreacting kind. I didn't care. I knew what I saw. They moved the washer aside, opened the hatch, and descended with their lights sweeping the darkness. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Then, "Found him!" I heard shuffling, grunting, then the unmistakable voice of someone muttering nonsense. One officer called up. "He's alive, disoriented. Looks like he's been down here a while." They dragged him out into the hallway. The man's eyes darted everywhere except at me. His hair hung over his face. His clothes were rags. He smelled like earth and rot and old sweat. He whispered something too quietly for anyone to understand. "Why was he crawling toward me?" I asked. The officer shrugged. "Hard to say. People in survival mode act strangely." I didn't tell him the truth. The man wasn't in survival mode when he approached. He was calm, silent, focused, like he'd been waiting for the moment he wasn't alone anymore. The police questioned me for an hour, their voices half sympathetic, half routine. The man didn't give his name, didn't give an explanation, didn't resist when they handcuffed him. They later found out he was a drifter reported missing from a few towns south, someone known for mental instability and long stretches of isolation. "Good news," an officer said. "He's harmless. Just unwell. Harmless." He crawled toward me in the dark with no expression and no sound. Nothing about that felt harmless. My landlord arrived after the police left. He was pale, trembling, and clearly terrified of being sued. I had no idea anyone could get down there," he insisted. "The vent must have been open for years. Look, I'll refund your rent. I'll pay for a hotel, Whatever you need." I didn't argue. I wanted out more than I wanted answers. That night I stayed in a motel near campus. When I tried to sleep, my brain replayed the same moment over and over. The way he rose from the blanket, the way his head tilted, the way he crawled without hesitation, without blinking, like the darkness was his home and I was the intruder. Every sound in the motel, the elevator, the ice machine, footsteps in the hall, became the dragging sound from the night before. By morning, I knew I wasn't going back. I broke my lease, packed my things with friends by my side, kept the hatch covered the entire time. I couldn't even walk near the laundry room without my chest tightening. Before I left, I stood in the empty duplex one last time. The ocean wind rattled the windows, and for a second, just a second, I thought I heard dragging again. I left without looking back. I moved into a student apartment closer to campus. It wasn't perfect. Thin walls, loud neighbors, small windows, but I could sleep without wondering who else was sharing the space beneath me. The police called a week later. The man had been transferred to a psychiatric facility. He wasn't violent. He wasn't dangerous. Just lost. Unwell. Searching for shelter. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Because when I closed my eyes, I didn't see a lost man. I saw the silhouette in the dirt. I saw him rising from the ground like something waking from hibernation. I saw his hands reaching forward, dragging across the earth as he crawled toward my light. Fear doesn't care about facts. Fear remembers shape, movement, silence. I still study late at night. I still listen to storms shake the windows. But I don't ignore strange sounds anymore. And I never, ever open a hatch alone. Sometimes I pass the old duplex on my way to the beach. The vent is no longer boarded up. The landlord replaced it with welded steel. A new tenant parks in the driveway. A kid with headphones and no idea what happened in the dirt below his bedroom. I want to warn him sometimes, but then I think, if I told him the truth, would he ever sleep again? That silent crawling, that moment when I realized I wasn't alone, changed something in me. It's not paranoia, it's caution, a new understanding. Darkness doesn't need ghosts or monsters. Sometimes one stranger in the wrong place is enough. Always trust the instinct that tells you something is wrong. Ignoring discomfort can put you in danger, but listening to it, even when it seems irrational, may be the very thing that protects your life. People assume working the graveyard shift at a remote gas station is boring. Sometimes it is, but there's a type of quiet that becomes its own warning, like the world holding its breath before something breaks. That was the kind of quiet hanging over Evergreen Fuel the night everything changed. I'd been on nights for almost a year, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 6 nights a week. The interstate outside the town of Evergreen was long and lonely, bordered by pine forests thick enough to swallow entire houses. On one side of the station sat a shuttered, graffiti-faded diner that used to serve the best pie in 3 counties. On the other side, miles of highway with fewer cars each year. Storms made the station feel even more isolated. Wind clawing at the windows, gutters screaming, rain slanting sideways. Usually I'd settle behind the counter with a paperback mystery, sipping reheated coffee and listening to the security monitors hum. But that November night, the air felt electric. Wrong. The kind of wrong you feel in your ribs. I kept checking the screens, even though nothing moved outside except trees whipping in the gusts. Only one trucker had stopped in hours, grabbing a coffee and grumbling about black ice ahead. After he left, the storm swallowed the world again. I told myself to relax. Storms do weird things to nerves, but the feeling wouldn't quit. Around 1:30 a.m., headlights cut through the rain. I straightened up, relieved to see life again. Then another set of headlights. then a third. All three cars pulled in at the exact same time, same speed, same angle, parking right in front of the store, not at the pumps. Their beams shone directly into the front windows like spotlights. Something sank in my stomach. 5 people stepped out, all wearing black raincoats, all wearing dark baseball caps. They didn't run through the downpour. They walked, deliberate and synchronized. "Okay," I whispered to myself. "This is weird." When they came in, their silence sucked the warmth out of the store. Water dripped off their coats, forming perfect little puddles on the tile. One man, younger than the others, peeled his hood back. He smiled at me, wide, almost friendly. "Busy night?" he asked, tapping the counter with fingers rough like he worked construction. I forced a smile. "Not really." The others drifted through the aisles without picking anything up. No browsing, no conversation, just scanning the shelves like inspectors. That's when the dread hit full force. They weren't customers. They were preparing. For what? I had no clue. But I knew it wasn't good. The youngest man leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "No alarms," he said calmly. "No calls. You're going to be okay if you stand still." The casual way he said "okay" made the hair on my arms rise. He didn't sound threatening. He sounded like someone explaining directions to a lost tourist. Behind him, the others unzipped duffel bags in perfect unison, like they'd practiced. The sound was almost soothing if it hadn't meant something very bad was about to happen. Then they moved fast, not chaotic, not frantic, efficient. One swept entire rows of medicine, energy bars, batteries into a bag without looking down. Another cleared shelves of lighters, razors, hygiene products, items that made no sense together unless someone was preparing to be off-grid for a long time. "Hey, you can't," I started, but the younger man tapped the counter twice, smiling. "Remember," he said, "you're going to be okay. Just stand still." The smile didn't reach his eyes. One of them vaulted the counter, landing beside me. He didn't acknowledge me at all, didn't look, didn't speak. He emptied the register with the precision of someone who'd counted the bills in advance. I stayed frozen, heart banging in my throat. You think you'll be brave. You think you'll fight back. But when 5 strangers move like a single organism, your body picks survival over pride. The man by the door stood guard, peering into the storm, not watching the road, but scanning the forest across the highway, like he was waiting for someone to emerge from it. My mouth went dry. What the hell were they preparing for? Suddenly one of them said, "Loadout is complete." Loadout, not theft, not robbery. Loadout. The youngest man gave a small nod. "Move." They zipped their bags, moving with unnerving synchronization. No shouting, no threats, no panic, just purpose. As they left, I heard the youngest man speak softly, not to me, not to his group, but to the nearest security camera above the exit. A single whisper, "Next." Then all 3 cars peeled out of the lot in perfect formation. I stood behind the counter long after they were gone, hands shaking so badly, I dropped the phone twice before dialing the police. It didn't matter. Even before officers arrived, I knew in my gut they weren't done. Officer Ramirez and Officer Quinn arrived within 15 minutes, storm jackets dripping all over the floor. I'd worked here long enough to know them by name. Small towns make those relationships inevitable. They took my statement as I replayed everything aloud, every detail, every movement, every item stolen. I tried to describe the youngest man's smile but couldn't find the right words. It wasn't menacing. It was worse. It was confident. "They weren't stealing random stuff," I said. "They were stocking up." Ramirez nodded slowly. "Sounds more organized than your typical highway crew." Quinn clicked through the security camera angles, brow furrowed. "Let's see if we can get a plate." The footage showed exactly what I remembered. 3 cars gliding in like some coordinated convoy, 5 figures entering with mechanical precision. Then Quinn paused the video. Hold on. She rewound, zoomed, adjusted the audio slider. And that's when I heard it. Right before the youngest man walked out, he looked directly up at the nearest camera, straight into the lens, and whispered, "Next." The words sounded too intimate, too personal, like he wasn't talking about the next gas station. My skin crawled. Ramirez made a low exhalation. "All right, that's deliberate." They sent the footage to the sheriff's office, told me to lock up early, told me to head home, sleep, breathe, try to calm down. But there was no calming down. 3 cars had arrived in unison. 5 people had moved like a trained unit. They hadn't stolen cash except for the register. They'd stolen survival supplies. This wasn't a robbery. It was staging. I drove home through the storm with hands tight on the wheel, knuckles white. Every pair of headlights behind me made my heart trip. Every shadow in the trees looked too still. I checked my door locks 5 times before bed, checked the windows twice, left the lights on. But sleep didn't come. Because the whole time, one question pushed against the back of my mind. Next what? I didn't have to wait long for the answer. At 3:42 a.m., just as the storm weakened and the wind shifted, I got a text from Ramirez. "Call me, urgent." My hands shook as I dialed him. He answered immediately. "Lydia, listen carefully. The next station down the interstate, about 30 minutes south." "Yeah?" They were hit. Same group, same cars. But this time, they didn't leave peacefully. A cold, hollow feeling spread through my chest. "What do you mean?" "They rammed the side of the building, injured the clerk, 2 customers hospitalized. The group didn't take cash. They only took goods, same pattern as yours." "Are they still out there?" I whispered. "We think so. And Lydia, the sheriff believes they're moving north, toward Evergreen." My heart thudded painfully. "Why north?" "Because your station wasn't the first." He paused. "And we don't think the next one will be the last." I pressed my palm to my forehead. "Why are they doing this?" Ramirez hesitated. "We don't know." The hesitation was worse than the words. After the call, I couldn't sit still. I paced my apartment like a trapped animal. My mind replayed the moment the youngest man tapped the counter, smiling too warmly. "You're going to be okay if you stand still." That wasn't reassurance. It was instruction. To not interfere. To not observe too much. To not interrupt whatever mission they were preparing for. At 5 a.m., another alert came through the sheriff's scanner channel. An abandoned car found near the forest edge. Not far from the interstate. Not far from Evergreen. Matching the description. 3 vehicles. Now only 2 unaccounted for. What terrified me wasn't that they were close. It was that they were moving with purpose. Like they had a map, and Evergreen was on it. I showed up to my shift early the next night because staying home felt worse than being at the station. At least Evergreen Fuel had lights, cameras, and the comfort of routine. But when I stepped inside, the air was thick with tension. Quinn was waiting by the coffee counter, arms crossed. "We're stationed here tonight," she said. "Sheriff wants eyes on this place." Ramirez appeared from the back room, checking his radio. "You're not alone tonight, Lydia." I should have felt safer. I didn't. The storm had passed, leaving the air unnervingly still. The shuttered diner across the lot looked darker than usual, as if the night had pooled inside it. Around 1:15 a.m., headlights glowed in the distance. 2 cars, driving in formation. My throat closed. Ramirez and Quinn drew their weapons, stepping to the windows. The cars slowed, then turned. Not toward the station, toward the forest trail entrance across the highway. They disappeared between the trees. No one spoke for a full minute. Finally, Quinn muttered, "What the hell are they doing out there?" I didn't have the courage to guess. The next morning, state police launched a search across the forest. They found footprints, discarded packaging, a makeshift fire pit, signs of movement, signs of planning. But not the group, not the youngest man with the too warm smile, not the one who whispered next. I quit Evergreen Fuel a week later, not because of the danger, but because I knew, deep down, something bigger was happening. You don't gather survival supplies in the dead of night. You don't move in formation. You don't scout stations in sequence unless you're preparing for something the rest of us haven't seen yet. I still think about them, especially on quiet nights, especially when the wind rattles the windows. Next, the word follows me everywhere. Pay attention to the wrong kind of quiet. Your instincts will notice danger long before your mind understands it. Trust that feeling, because sometimes the only warning you get is the one you almost ignore.